Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. So if you don't mind just introducing yourself, telling us who you are, what your role is, and maybe a little bit about your background working in this area.
Yeah, so I'm Jacqueline. I'm the head of people and culture here at Hospice UK. I have worked within the HR sphere for over 20 years, but within the charity sector for 16 years now.
Wow.
I came from sort of disability charity background.
Yeah.
So I think the topic that we're going to be talking about today is, yeah, very relevant.
Yeah, prominent.
So yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Oh, we're so pleased and thankful for you joining us today as part of our National Grief Awareness Week podcast series. And today we're going to really talk about have a really open conversation about policies, about management, and actually about how we can create kind of more grief-friendly organisations. So as somebody who's worked in the sector for a number of years, as you've just disclosed there, what would be your kind of the key things that you've learned about the way that we handle grief in the workplace, or the way that bereavement is set up or not set up in the workplace to talk about?
I think it has really changed. You
Yeah.
know, when I started out, all those years ago, I think HR was seen as very much you had a policy, it had to be standard, you had to stick to it.
Yeah.
I was listening to actually a podcast a few weeks ago around exactly this, where it was much more rigid.
Absolutely.
And as time has gone on, we are adapting to the people. Ultimately, it went from calling it HR to people and culture, because it's about putting the people first.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of organizations would have a compassionate leave policy, and it was, you can have a day off
Yeah,
for,
absolutely.
whichever family member, or if it was ex family member, you could have up to 3 days. And I think we all know that grief is not like that.
Yeah,
And you
absolutely.
can't put a time on a certain person or what that looks like in terms of time off.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges, especially in people and culture teams, at HR departments, actually creating policies that can be this backbone, but actually having that infrastructure for what the guidance looks like around that, so that people feel like it can be adapted to meet the needs of employees. Because policies are crucial, they're really
Yes.
important to have. But actually adapting them can be slightly challenging sometimes, to know exactly what fits the needs of that person in that moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously, within HR, you do need to follow certain guidelines.
Yeah.
But I think, the way we write policies now is that it should be able to be slightly more flexible, and not have that one size fits all.
A little bit more of a human lens that maybe has been in previous years.
Yeah, no,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Yeah, I think one of the big things as well for us at the moment that we're seeing is much more of an evolution around the topic of inclusion and equity, and making sure that policies actually meet the needs of our incredibly diverse workforces. So it'd be great to hear any reflections from you in terms of how we can do that to better kind of represent the people within our organisations, and make sure that the policy fits the needs for the people who maybe have bereavements overseas, or indeed have different cultural traditions that they witness through the bereavement process.
Yeah, again, I think it's about, we have our flexible hybrid working policy, and it's about having something that opens up those conversations to be able to allow those differences that might be needed at that time.
So I suppose leading on from that, we've been having much more conversations about the importance of inclusion and equity in people policies, especially when it comes to loss, grief, bereavement, and actually making sure that our policies are fit for the people who work within our diverse workforces. So it'd be great to hear any reflections about, the importance of what inclusion looks like in those people policies that really matter.
I think we have to, acknowledge that grief is different to different people, and recognizing, what those different types of loss are, whether that is, a family member living in the same country or city, somebody that, you have to travel for. Recognizing different cultural practices. People will need different time off depending on what their belief in their culture is working towards. And I think, as we're, talking about being inclusive, we have to acknowledge that that is a key part, in how different cultures, work with and deal with death and grief.
Absolutely.
And practices like that as well. I think also, you know, some people, you know, silence or coming back to work doesn't mean that people have dealt with it. And I think that's also a key thing around looking at inclusive practices, that, you know, it could be weeks, months, years, and just because someone doesn't necessarily talk about it at work doesn't mean that, you know, they've moved on and dealt with that. And I think we have to remind us, so line managers will have to think about that as well within the constraints of policies.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the other side is that idea that, you know, grief is so unique, and it's one of the biggest challenges with having a policy that's one size fits all, that actually each person's experience of grief will be so unique to that person. And somebody might experience multiple different bereavements during an employment, but they might deal with each of those incidences very differently. You know, grief can manifest in lots and lots of different ways for us. So creating policies that can have that flexibility so that we can really kind of meet people where they are, understand exactly what it is that they're going through, is one of those really kind of crucial elements of really creating a culture of compassion, a culture of safety for people to be able to come back and really speak about, you know, what life looks like now for them when they're navigating a new normal.
Yeah, exactly. And I think something obviously that we do here is we have well, obviously the brilliant Compassionate Employers Getting to Know You document, okay, which highlights, you know, you can share key dates that are important to you, so that line managers get to know that person as an individual, and can, you know, mark a day that is
anniversaries, birthdays.
Exactly.
I think the importance of having that conversation around, you know, policies are really good in those early days to really have some structure around how to manage a bereavement immediately, but actually that guidance and that comprehensive support for that ongoing, you know, we know that grief isn't linear, we know that it's not stages and then we're over it or we're through it, but actually quite often it's this dual process where we're bouncing back and forth between loss and restoration. And actually that, like you say, it can be weeks, it can be months, it can be years, and every employee will be slightly different in the needs that they have during those times. And I suppose it's, you know, for employers, it's for us to recognize that and be able to create space for them to feel safe in both of those elements, bringing their grief to work. And I suppose leading on from that, you know, this year, National Grief Awareness Week, our theme is growing around grief, or growing through grief. And we talk a little bit about the importance of creating space for people to flourish and thrive after a bereavement. We often see people who have been bereaved going through a period of post-traumatic growth, which is often when people kind of really reevaluate what's important to them in life. You know, they might completely shift their work priorities, they might have a complete shift in their identity. And actually it's really important for us as employers to show up for them as they're navigating this new time in their lives. And we know that, you know, there's a real challenge for lots of people returning to work because there's such a massive shift in their identity and this new normal that they're trying to navigate. So what are your kind of top tips for creating a space that feels safe for people to come back to work?
Yeah, I think, again, this probably falls quite heavily on the line managers, and obviously as HR people and culture teams, to be able to support line managers to have those open conversations, to not, I suppose, shy away from them. You know, as a line manager, asking what that individual needs. You know, I suppose it's one of those things of, you know, rather than saying, "Are you okay today?" It's, "What can I do to help you today?" So that if they're, you know, if that individual has things, actually, do you know what, it would be really helpful, I don't want to come to any meetings, or you know, whatever that looks like.
Those adaptations can make the world of difference.
Exactly. And you know, we talk about reasonable adjustments in all different aspects, from whether that's disability, returning to work from maternity leave, but I would say that's also coming back to work from, you know, a bereavement. And again, there's no time frame for that because everybody is different. So I definitely think supporting those line managers to be able to have those open conversations.
Absolutely.
It was interesting because I had a friend recently that lost her mum, and she said her workplace were absolutely amazing. And it was even the WhatsApp messages from, you know, "I'm not expecting you to respond to this, I just want to let you know that we're thinking of you." She actually really appreciated that, because she knew that, okay, I don't have to reply to them, but actually that's really nice just to know that they're thinking of me. And it's, I suppose, continuing that through that kind of theme through someone coming back to work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that creating space is a huge part of it, isn't it? That space for vulnerability allows for others to be vulnerable in that space with you. And I think, witnessing and recognizing the impact that it can have on people's lives. Some people will return to work because they want the distraction, because it's easier for them to get on, or indeed the financial complications of being off work long term doesn't work out for most people. But also, some people will really need that time and that gentle guidance and that hand holding for those first few weeks or months back into work. And again, like you say, that looks different for everyone. And thank you for plugging our Get to Know Me document. It will be available to download at the end of this. But it's really important for us to really understand the people in our teams, because it makes it much easier for us to show up for them in those crucial moments. And you've spoken then about line managers. It'd be great to hear about, how Hospice UK has developed. I know, for the last few years, we're both quite new to the organisation, but there has been huge amounts of development, especially across people and culture, in terms of how we really show up for people in those significant life moments, from carers to bereavement. And all the way through the spectrum of kind of different life events that might happen while somebody's in employment. So how do you equip people to be able to kind of have those conversations with their teams? Again,
I think it goes back to just being open with people. I suppose the more you share, I'm not saying everyone has to open up about themselves, but we've again spoken about life events. So yes, we talk about grief from bereavement, but there's other life events, whether that's the loss of a pet or going through a relationship breakdown, or there's other things. I think that if we're open, there's more of an understanding, and then we're able to support in those life events as well.
Absolutely. And I think, it's interesting, we kind of talk about the idea that actually community has shifted quite dramatically into the workforce. So many of us used to live down the road from our family members, our friends. We would be very connected to the people around us, and they would be our support network. But now a lot of us, with the movement of people, with the cost of living crisis, means that maybe we don't live as close to those kind of original support networks as we did previously. And so therefore we're finding that community at work. So actually, having those people to share those life moments with, they are probably the people you're going to spend most of your weeks with. And like you say, it's not just about grief or caring, but it's about those moments of vulnerability. Pet loss is a huge one, the breakdown of relationships, even just children going off to university, those big life moments. Like, we are all going through those every day, and different employees will need different things from their employers through each of those life moments. So I think creating that space for honest conversation about how we're really doing and how we're navigating it is crucial.
And I think also some people are probably a little bit scared that they might get it wrong, and I think
absolutely
that it's, have the conversation. If someone sort of has to flag until you haven't quite, that's not quite the right terminology or language, that's okay as well, because we're continually learning.
Absolutely.
And I think don't be afraid to have that conversation.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the big things when people come to us is, what do I say in this moment? And honestly, one of our biggest tips is listen, hold space, make time, hear what that person is asking of you, listen to the language they are using, mirror that language back to them. It's much easier to be present when we're actively sat in that moment with that person and actively listening to what they need, because sometimes they don't need anything. They don't need you to say anything. They just need you to sit in that moment with them and hold that space for vulnerability. And sometimes they'll be coming to you with more practical support needs. I'm really struggling with the brain fog since coming back to work. I have this to-do list and I have no idea how to prioritize it, or I need a bit more of your time just to be able to chat and talk about how I'm actually feeling. And it's about meeting people there. It's about showing up for them in those moments in the ways that really count and matter for them. So really, really helpful reflections. Thank you so much. As we kind of close this lovely conversation, is there anything in particular that you've learned along the way that you'd like to pass on, in terms of, things that somebody who maybe works in a similar area to you can really do to advocate for those people in their staff who might be going through bereavement?
I think it comes back to that same theme of just putting people first, putting that person first, understanding that everybody is different. But there's no right or wrong. You do what you feel is right, whether that's, you know, advising a line manager, you know, if you have regular one-to-ones, I don't know, make sure once every 4 to 6 weeks the first 15 minutes is around, you know, about tell me how, you know, what can I do to help you, you know, is there anything extra that you need from me, so that you have that dedicated time, that it's not rushing straight into the busy, you know.
Absolutely.
One-to-one.
I think we're probably, most of us are guilty of going into one-to-ones with that to-do list of, okay, have you done this and have you done that, and then the question comes at the end of, and how are you? I've got 2 minutes left before I jump into the next call.
Start with that question
Start
first.
with that question. I really like that. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.